Hi, thanks for joining this week's Author Office Hours. Today, we're going to talk about memoirs again, but we're going to be talking about the difference between telling your story and telling your business. And it is a nuance. I actually wrote an article about this for Thrive Global a few years back, and I will share the link in my show notes. So, if you haven't already understood or seen, readers, people in general, are longing for authenticity and wisdom and truth. And to be honest, I blame reality TV from the 90s for all of this. and as a result, we've had even more reality TV. We have influencers and TikTok where people are like telling, I think, way too much of their business. But we also have people who really want to write their memoir. And you don't have to be famous, you don't have to be rich to tell a powerful story or a lesson. So, the number one thing that you need to write a really good memoir is you need to stop caring what other people think about you. And I know that's difficult. Even at my ripe old age of 54, I still struggle with it a bit. Not as much as I did in my 20s, but a lot less than I did in my 20s. So we're going to talk about the 3 levels of vulnerability, and then I'm going to give you an example for each level of vulnerability. Okay, so the first example is not enough vulnerability. And that is a common failure. People really, they want to write the memoir, but they shy away from the details that make readers understand where they were coming from and understand the choices that they made, good or bad. And doing so prevents the reader from understanding the transformation and also understanding their ability to make their own transformation. So, a common failure when people don't have a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of analogies instead of telling their actual story. They spend a lot of time defending and justifying their bad behavior instead of actually saying what happened and how they got over it, right? And there's a book, a memoir that came out, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago from an up and coming pastor. And I bought the book. I was incredibly disappointed. I don't think I read past chapter 2. I took a look at the reviews, and just like me, the readers felt cheated. Let me give you an example of some of the things I said. One reviewer said, huge disappointment. She wore me out with all those analogies. It took up more space than necessary. It's not about wanting to hear her tell her business. It was about her overwhelming readers with all those analogies cutting into her story. She would have been better off writing a book of poetry if she wanted to spew all that analogy. That is an example of someone who just wasn't ready to write a memoir about the choices that she made. Another example, I'm going to go both ends of the spectrum, is giving too much detail. And this is a rare example, but it happens. When people overshare, the details become gratuitous instead of being purposeful. And a lot of people do it, and you'll be surprised because they're still in it. There's not enough distance from healing from what happened. So they're missing the transformation and lessons. They're just talking about what they did. And sometimes when it's therapy and not really a story, and sometimes, as we know, in therapy, you don't really reach the healing. You're still using your therapist as a sounding board. And that's what some memoirs sound like when you give out too much detail. The example I have for that is a memoir called A Piece of Cake. You actually have to pay for a cookie. And I think so. And they wrote, her relentless litany of crimes and cruelties tests readers' endurance. And then another reader said the book was exhausting. And that's when you know that you've crossed into too much detail. And the reader review says when the details start numbing readers instead of connecting them. And that's what the reader said. So, what should you be looking for when it comes to telling your story without telling what to be just right? Want to write about what happened and how it affected you without sharing every lewd detail. You want to balance your story with the emotional impact, with the lessons, with transformation. You can even throw in some facts and statistics, some before and after, instead of going into I did this, did this, did this, did this, which is what a piece of cake. An example for a memoir that's just right, and I'm pretty sure you've already read it, is Viola Davis's Finding Me. And she shares details about poverty, sexual abuse, racism, but every story she tells us, it goes back to the universal theme of finding her worth. And this is what a reviewer said. So the first third of the book was so dark that she stopped. It was just like to read, but it wasn't exhausting. It was transformative. So when you think about the difference between Viola Davis and the book entitled A Piece of Cake, Viola shared traumatic details that served her theme of finding herself and her self-worth. Whereas with the other author, it was a litany of story trauma that exhausted the reader, made it hard to empathize. So when we talk about Viola Davis and the difference of a memoir that doesn't have enough vulnerability, you get when it's lacking vulnerability, excessive analogies instead of explaining what happened, pages of defending and justifying bad choices. Readers are left asking, why are you telling us this? What's the point? And then there's no clear transformation or takeaway. But Viola, her book, she doesn't defend or explain away her experiences. She just told what happened, how she felt. That's the purpose of a memoir. And the reader reviews, they say that they felt transformation from her being a lost child to the woman who's finally found her worth. There was a clear purpose in sharing the painful moments of her life. So, if you want to write your memoir, this is your test. Ask yourself, does this detail, does this story serve my reader's understanding of the universal truth that I'm trying to share? If it doesn't move the theme forward, it's time to let it go. That's it for this week's Authors Office Hours. And I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.